Hi, friends. Welcome back. I have a dear friend here, Samantha Sweetwater. She's an author, a coach, and a wisdom guide who has spent 3 decades helping thousands navigate personal and collective transformations. As the founder of Dance Freedom, Peace Body, Japan, and One Life Circle, she pioneered new forms of embodied awakening and trained hundreds of facilitators globally. She partners with worldwide shaping leaders to awaken, heal, and align impact with humanity and planetary flourishing. Her work lives at the confluence of ecology, spirituality, complexity, inviting you to come more alive by remembering your place within the song of life. We're going to talk about her new book, True Human, Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World. It's such a thrill to have her here because we journeyed together on this work, and I got to be a part of it in some small way. And I'm so grateful she's here. Samantha, welcome.
Thank you, Azul. It's good to be here.
So before we dive into this journey of writing this book, let the listeners know, what people who are watching this or listening, why this book? What's the message? If you could give it to us in a gentle way so that people can actually enter in this conversation as we have it about your book.
Yeah. Yeah. So True Human, Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World is about what it means to be human at a time when we are facing systemic challenges that are actually unique in our evolutionary biology. They're unique in the evolution of civilizations that have come and gone and risen and collapsed or evolved. And it's unique in the evolution of the planet in relationship to us as a technological species who now has, we're well into the Anthropocene, into a time in human history and geological history when we are the most impactful force on the planet geologically at the level of shaping planetary systems. And so it's about how to recontextualize ourselves. It's about seeing ourselves in the context of planetary process and what that invites for purpose and healing and a reimagining of what we are as these profoundly creative species who, in my way of thinking, we have a custodial role. We have a very specific role in planetary ecology, which is to tend the robustness and vitality and resilience and beauty of the world, the living world and the technocultural world.
Right. I remember when we first started this conversation and I was reading some of your early manuscripts. I was a little awashed in the whole conversation. I was like, oh, wait, I have to open my mind like way bigger than I normally do when I'm helping an author because we're talking about a book's depth that I had to like wrestle with. When I think about it, there were so many ways this book could have evolved into. True Human had many forms before it arrived as it is now. Let's talk about those early days and finding the pathway forward for this book. What was it like for you starting out on this journey?
Well, I mean, as you know, as a book doula, as a book coach, is that I think the most intimidating thing is telling one's own story. And I think as I went deeper into finding what I really wanted to say, it also strengthened the part of me that was willing to be revealed in my own story. And the thing that surprised me, but it's a funny feeling when you're like, oh, there I am. Like when as the writer, you're carrying all this insight, and the insight has come from life experience. And as you continue to write, you realize that you have to share the life experience to contextualize and like give color and vitality to the insight. And so like the book brought me more into transparency with my own experience. Like writing it brought me forward that way.
Tell us what the journey was like. It was several years. I mean, when you came to me for help, I thought, well, I don't know what shape this is in. Let's just see. Let's just dive in a little bit. And you wanted some support, but it was mainly for like launching the book. It wasn't necessarily just the writing. So tell me about that. How did it shift for you as you were working on the manuscript?
Yeah. I mean, I thought I was much further along than I actually was when I came to you. And then I started to discover that the pieces were really basic. They were really unformed. There was a ton more work to do. And in organizing, in synthesizing, in deepening the research, and like there was so much more work to do. And the process was exhausting. It was sometimes demoralizing. It was humbling. It was so humbling to feel like, you know, this book came together out of a whole but many existing writings. And I think, you know, that's one way to put a book together. Like, I don't think like, I think it's much neater and cleaner to start with an idea and begin writing than it is to come with a bunch of writings and try to like reverse engineer an idea. But this book was many ideas that wanted to dance together and then finding how they danced. And the first couple, I mean, for me, it's been a 4-year process. We worked together for 3 years. So when I came to you, I had a first draft of all the pieces put together, dancing together. Yeah, and what was so humbling was recognizing how actually unformed they were, how they hadn't yet created a whole that was an invitation. And I knew that, but I didn't want to know it. It was like what was surprising was the slow process of self-honesty that was the way that the book actually got done, and really beginning to listen as a mature communicator to myself and to the words and to the book, and to allow it to ground into that maturity and that invitation to the reader. I think also what was surprising and is constantly surprising to me about writing is the way that writing, we talked about this a lot, it's the relationship between time and writing is mind-blowing. There's nothing like writing long form things to take a lot of time. It's a very,
Right.
very time consuming process. And that was surprising. Yeah, those were aspects of my experience.
The book being in the world, I know there was so much expectation that you had for it, and that it was the culmination of a life's work. And it's important. You know, we talked about there's more than one book in here. And that was one of the things we had to realize. And then what was the book that it needed to be now versus the books it could have been or the books it might follow, and pulling them apart like gently so that they stayed intact and true, but that you were able to still resonate with the book in a deep way. You didn't feel like you were abandoning any concepts. Let's talk about some of that. Let's talk about what for you was some of those moments of like, oh, okay, I have to rescue this piece or I have to nurture this piece and let go of others.
Yeah, I mean, this book is a very holistic book, right? The book is designed as a book where if you needed one book to navigate a radical civilizational transition, a transition from an age of human dominion over nature to an age of human reciprocity and collaboration with nature, where you're part of that. The personal journey of that is really discovering how extraordinary and meaningful it is to recognize that your life is part of like an endlessly weaving tapestry of intelligence that is weaving forward in time. So cool.
Yeah.
That this book was designed as here's everything you need. Here's the minimum viable everything you need book for both the personal journey of that and the collective journey of that. And that meant paring down aspects of the personal journey, for example. And it meant getting like concise about aspects of the collective journey. It also meant recognizing that the book would speak to different readers very differently and being okay with that. Like, particularly, I have seen that there's people who like really focus on the third section, which is the section on personal transformation. And then there's a lot of people where that section is like the least interesting thing, like it's a take it or leave it section for them, and they're really interested in the rest of the book. And like, I just had a really brilliant elder of mine who's like, he's read the last chapter twice and really highlighted a bunch of things. And the last chapter for me could be a whole book, and it's very dense, but it was like, here's a way we can think about enter into the collective process we're in as a ceremony for a small planet that is a context. It's a crucible for collective evolution, and that we can navigate consciously, and both as individuals and as a collective. And it's been interesting to see how people are responding to that chapter, for example.
Yeah, let's talk about the crucible chapter, because I know that there's some life there, some conversation about how that really came to be, because I I, I can't be a knower of all the things that I coach people through, but I have to have an open heart and watch for the beats or the things that get my attention when I'm with a book, with the words, because my gift isn't words. I'm a dyslexic. My words get in the way for me. So I have to look for the things that are just under the surface of the words, that if the words weren't there, what would it be? And I know that might be strange to people, but before there's words, there's other things. And that's where I tend to feel the most energy when I'm working on a manuscript. Tell me a little bit about that process so that people could hear how that works for someone on the other end.
Around feeling what's alive.
Yeah, how to nurture the chapters, some chapters, and give it focus, where others you have to sort of pull back.
Yeah, it's an interesting dance. I think different topics structure themselves differently, right? Like some topics they want to be chaotic. They want to have they have many different ways that you could talk about them or experience them, and some topics want to be very ordered. With the planetary crucible chapter, I was grappling with, like, what are the biophysical dynamics of the situation that we're in, where we have more complex technologies than we've ever had, where we have greater ecological degradation than we've ever experienced, where we're more on screens than we've ever been, where there's more toxicity in our environment than there's ever been, where there's more anthropomass and anthropocomplexity than there's ever been, when we move around more than we've ever moved around as any previous generation that's ever been. And like, how is that biophysically and culturally and psychologically like a very unique crucible that we're all experiencing, but that it's so transcontextual that we rarely really identify it, and I mean, we've definitely identified it as a mental health crisis, as a crisis of loneliness, as a crisis of anxiety, like the ways in which we have identified it, but we don't define those crises and rarely define them in terms of this like massive when I say transcontextual, I mean, it's social, it's biophysical, it's technological, it's rhythmic, it's chemical. It's like, that chapter was really an interesting chapter to write, because I feel like spiritual teachers say, consciousness is evolving, and psychological, social scientists say we're in a loneliness crisis. And we rarely, and like ecological people say, like, we're losing our biodiversity, but we rarely connect the dots with those things actually being a biospiritual experience that everyone's navigating, that actually presents both unique opportunities and really unique challenges. Or we could flip that order: unique challenges and really unique opportunities for our evolution. And I mean, it's also interesting because that chapter is one of the chapters where, if I rewrote the book, I would rewrite that chapter in a more, I would restructure it in a more elegant way. Because that was like one of those chapters where you're like, there's so much insight here that I don't feel like anyone else is talking about. And you're like really grappling with what it is to share that insight and structure it in a way that people can understand it. And there's also this like pressure to share an idea that feels really generative that no one else is talking about.
Yeah. For me, I was like, I'm having to learn a new language here in order to help you. And like, as we think about the writing process, and if there's leaders out there listening or people who have a book in their heart that's moving them, because this feels like a message that needed to come out of you or else kind of like that. I could sense when I met you, like, this is almost a burden to keep carrying. I have to share this. And when I have leaders who come with that sort of weight on their shoulders, it can be daunting. What advice, what would you encourage people, because you went through this process of writing an epic book, what would you give them as a guidance or some direction or help them in some way that you wish you could have had in this process?
Well, what I did have, which was your support, was this reminder to be patient with yourself and patient with the, I think of ideas like that they're like souls that want to be nurtured into being, and you have to have the spaciousness in yourself to do that, as well as the structural discipline, which isn't fun. That's not about inspiration. That's about taking time with the research and taking time with the left brain aspect of organizing the information. But patience is at the core of it, and not inspiration. And I think that, that is what I would say to people is there's a sense sometimes with the idea is very fiery and it wants to be born. And then that fiery energy can actually short circuit the much more like stately process of putting it into form. And the mood of writing in general, in my experience, is not inspired. It's attentive, and it's also aesthetic in a warm way. Like there's structure and there's beauty, but it's like staying very like stately and patient in the center of it. That's to me when things you get most productive. That's when the flow states arise.
Right. It's really hard in that editorial phase to stay in it. It's so easy to want to abandon it because it is really challenging. You've been swimming in it for so long. I have to back away from it. I might have to rearrange this work. I might have to let go of some of the precious pieces I've written. And I think that surprises most people. I mean, it did for you in the beginning when you first were like, okay, I'm ready. I'm like, well, let's talk about this. That feeling of we just want to be done. I think you were extremely disciplined with grace. You had life to live. You had a community to lead, a business run, but you gave it time and you were really clear, like, I can't do it here, but I will do it here, here, and here. And then I'll take a break and I'll do this. And I think that's the hardest part for me, even on my journey of writing this book I've been working on for almost a decade, which is, it's not because it's hard. It's because it's calling my attention to the reader's experience. I was done with the content a long time ago, but the reader's experience was not happening. It was not the energy. It was my experience on the page, but I needed to reshift. Tell us about some of the delightful experiences you've had since you've shared this to the world, because writing a book's exhausting. And then there's the marketing, which is a whole nother thing. That
Whole
in a minute,
nother
but
thing, also exhausting.
also exhausting in a new way. Well, let's talk about how it felt to get it out and have a reception. Then we'll go back to the marketing.
I think I did a big book party at this really amazing venue with a big fireplace. And we set up this really great tableau that was like the book reading zone with a light and big easy chair. And I set the audience up in like this, like kind of in a round with a big cuddle zone in the middle. So some people like snuggled up and listened like little kids in the middle. And so many people, like I had people fly out from all over the country to come to that book reading and book opening. It was a very cool event. And I think There's been a lot of cool things. I've reconnected with old friends who are really excited about the book and really moved by the book. I've had people just reach out and say, like, this book is already dog-eared and underlined, and surprising things of people putting it as their number one book, like prepping for 2026. That's been really amazing. I've had the people whose baby boomer parents were like picked it up and wouldn't put it down. People really consistently buying more than one copy and sharing it and giving it as gifts because people feel like this book talks about where we are right now in our evolution and why it's confusing and why like it's confusing in different ways than any previous time in human history. So people feel really validated by this book. And the way that when people feel that, they are like, I want other people to understand this. That's been really surprising and exciting. What's also been really delightful is when people say, like, I was feeling really lonely and then I found this and now I don't feel lonely and now I'm finding other people. That's really amazing because it
Yeah.
validates a lot of intuitive insights that we don't always have language for. Um, it's been surprising to me how hard it is to sell books too.
Yeah.
On the challenging side of like, wow, people don't just buy books just cause, they really,
Yeah.
they really need to feel they have a really good reason. It's been interesting to see where the market is around ebooks or around the physical copybook or around audiobooks. And, I think about a quarter of the market now really doesn't buy physical books. People listen to books a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where the shift's happening back and forth. I think there are some generations. I'm hopeful, maybe Gen Z, maybe the ones after Generation Alpha, but like I think it's almost a novelty to buy books again and go to a bookstore. But it's a slow trend. I'm hoping that it becomes an
Yeah.
incredible trend where people want to disconnect from technology. But I think you're right. I think so many more people are listening to books than they are reading them. And when you talk to someone and said, "Oh, yeah, I just read a book," a good portion of those times, they mean they'll just listen to a book. And if there's not listenable, they won't read it, which is interesting. I find that challenging, but I also understand. It's where we are, right? It's a little bit about what you're talking about in your book. You're like, it's shifting the planet, this technology and these things that might seem ubiquitous, but they are shifting this global humanity that your book really tries to give us a sense of a trueness. Um, I want to talk about the cover because I love the cover. I think it's like packaging your baby, because you want it to look on the outside the way it feels to you on the inside. Tell me about that process because it's iterative. There's no way to get a book right in the first tries, but I was really encouraged the way you were really collaborative because being a part of the publishing team, we have to bring around the book that the authors want. Let's talk about that. Tell me about the cover. And if you can't see it, go get the book, go buy it wherever you buy books. But I want you to see this cover.
The covers, I love the cover, and people love the cover. The cover is very timely and timeless. It's really an interesting blend it's an AI, it's a Midjourney image that I crafted that, we worked with your artists and we had a bunch of ideations and nothing was really gelling for me. I was like, I'm not really excited about any of these designs. And we were kind of down to the wire. And I said, we got 4 days. I'm just going to go for this. And I put my heart and soul into those 4 days. I spent so much time. I worked on 3 different ideas that, all of which were interesting and cool. And what was the cover is a picture of a woman in profile in black and white in a very like deserty tones that she has nature and the frequency of the universe inside of her. And that image was initially inspired by a Brazilian illustrator who I had found 4 years earlier and asked 4 years earlier if he would do my cover design, and he said no. And when it came time to do this cover design, I asked him again, and he said no again. And so then when I was working on the Midjourney version, I reached out to him and I asked his permission to use his idea and ideate on it. And he said yes. He said he would be thrilled. And thank you for asking. Which, if you're ever doing AI images, like that's actually correct provenance in terms of like copyright relationship and care for everybody's IP. And like all these really amazing things happen. The image on it is actually a likeness of me that I put in so that it wouldn't be someone else's image. And what was amazing with that particular image is that there's a ripple at the center of it that wasn't in the idea for that image, but that was actually one of the other ideas for a different cover. That
Yeah.
when what's trippy about AI art is it will re-hallucinate a previous idea. And in that particular image, it like reactivated another theme that I'd been working on the day before and had scrapped and said, like, I'm not going to use that idea. And then it brought them together in this way that was mind blowing because, part of the whole teaching of True Human is that we both contain the song of the universe within us. And we're here to collaborate with that song. Like we're here to find our unique note in the song of life and or our part of the song to sing it, which also requires being open and attuned, requires dancing in a resonant and coherent process with the rest of life. It's not about a spirituality of just go within to find yourself. It's about a spirituality of attunement to self and to other and to world in this ongoing process of aliveness. And so that image just like captures that so powerfully of what it is to be in the aliveness,
Yeah.
and in communion with more than oneself.
Right. I was really grateful for that because sometimes we get images that are generated like this, but we can't build them. But I was so grateful we were able to make it print quality, like taking that and then kind of rebuilding the art so that it would hold up. And I thought it printed so beautifully. Yeah, I'm so proud of that
Yeah.
because it was a collaborative thing, and I really think that that's important to a book. Um, so let's talk a little bit about
Yeah.
marketing
Your
before we.
designers did such great work with the font and everything. And the interior of the book matches the cover so beautifully, and that was such a fun collaborative process of finding little plants and finding the little, the different ways that the different offerings in the book are framed visually so
Yeah,
that it makes sense.
yeah, I love that when the book inside feels like the outside. It's so important to me. I mean, it may not be important to everyone, but it's a physical thing. It's like it's a thing that you hold. You want it to have a life as you read it, not just the moment you picked it up. So
Mhm.
as we're talking a little bit about marketing, then maybe we'll just meander wherever there's a lot of time left. But marketing a book can be a journey in itself that can lead you all over the place. And one of the things I always try to encourage authors is have a plan, have a window of time. Realize this is a long journey. Don't just think about it for 3 months and then think somehow it's going to magically just keep going. You have to keep nurturing it in many, many ways and pick a lane. Don't try to do all of it. Let's talk about how that went for you in planning and probably is still going. And maybe we can even talk about things that I've seen work years after sometimes a launch.
Oh, I'm so curious. I'd love to hear. Um, I, we went the route of Amazon bestseller. Um, I hired a publicist for a short amount of time who really helped me with that, like with all the assets, social assets, email assets, internal to community assets. Like I really mapped out an Amazon bestseller plan that was really clear and it worked beautifully. Like I called on about 200 people in my community to be early buyers, early reviewers, people showed up and, bought the book, did the thing, wrote the social posts. I mean, and that's a risky moment because you're really asking for a push of social capital that you can't re-ask for,
Yeah.
and and it and that was really scary. It was like I'd never asked for help quite like that from my whole community, and it went really well. And we, because there was a we at that point, did a really good job communicating in a way that was really loving and connective. Like, I think it wove connection in a powerful way. Right now, the core of my strategy is podcast tours and small book events that are like, we don't have the people power to really generate a national book campaign, like bookstore campaign. But what's interesting is there's people all over the place who want to host gatherings. And, once you're in the the engine of sales, you realize that like a 12 book sale day is a good day. And, so it's like if there's 20 people in a living room and 12 of them buy books, it's a good day. And you never know where that's going to go with new connections and webs. I'm also building a course right now for Gaia Education, which is an international university that is kind of a gold standard internationally around regenerative education. So we're building a course in dialogue with them right now to build a course with them. And I think the strategy evolves, right? Like you kind of have to be in this call and response. There's a bit of a pause right now. It's like podcasts aren't as effective as I thought they would be in terms of book sales. It's interesting to just get to know, like, people love to listen to the conversation. They may not buy a book. They do appreciate the conversation. I get messages back and people are like, I heard this conversation. I saw you were with so and so, but they don't always buy books, and that's okay. And yeah, I'm continuing to learn the what's next. I'm sitting with there's the Gaia education strategy. I'm considering doing a signature talk for like Unitarian churches because this message is really about anchoring our devotion back into reciprocity with life, into regenerative processes and resilience and mutual aid. And so I'm considering doing that, which could be a really cool context to tour. And
Yeah.
what I keep learning is like with this book, and I think this is probably not the case with all books, but this book has application in so many different domains. So I came out of the gate with like, oh, do I want to do this? And do I want to do that? And I'm taking my time to feel where there's like real affinity and vitality in terms of where I want to focus my energy and continuing to offer the book. Like, I thought I might do a bunch of like work around its application in the tech space. And I just find that that my body doesn't ground there.
Yeah. Yeah. We had talked about that earlier on. That might be a space that could be a potential, but you have to go where your energy is with books. And that was one of the things I was going to share to the listeners. One, I want to remind people that the books that have been known over times weren't always bestsellers of the gateway. And even if they were, they weren't necessarily selling lots of copies. I always remind people Paulo Coelho's book Alchemist sold 900 copies the first year, and he banged down every door. And then they dropped him. His publisher dropped him, said, we can't keep publishing this book. So he went back to go try to get another publisher and struggled. And it was one or two people. It was a young woman that brought the book to Spain and had it translated, and it took off. So like, it's just
Wow.
so interesting to think, well, no, it must have just took off. People thought it was a really silly small book which it didn't matter much. And there's lots of wonderful books that we've come to know that didn't have the reception in the way because they were before people were ready. But those books have to be written before people are ready, or they won't be in time, they'll be too late. So I just want to encourage you and anyone listening, even self-published books of Miracle Morning, whether I don't follow that practice or whatever from Hal Elrod. he sold a lot of copies. He would hit the ground hard and sold like 10,000 copies and then just sort of fizzled out. And it was like years and years and years later that it started to take off as a community. And now there's like
Huh,
generative copies of that book in different areas. So don't
huh.
think that because it's not taking off now that it's not working. Your energy was mostly in the manuscript, mostly in the words, mostly in the work. You have to regenerate a little bit to get back into the place of where it can go. And typically what I've observed books to take off are when community members within a small group start to use it, talk about it. A university professor talks about it. A certain group of people start saying, I want to host a book club. How do I do that? So just keep with it and follow your energy. Don't go where your energy is depleted because it can happen so quick. I promise. Any other words you'd share about this journey as a book writer, as an author, um, as a leader?
It's weirdly worth it. I think that if you have an impulse to write a book, if it's strong in you, there's a spiritual gravity to writing it and being the writer of it and sharing it that it's interesting. I think I'm thinking of Milan Kundera right now and the unbearable lightness of being. There's both a gravity to it and almost an unbearable lightness to it that's so
Mm,
specific. It's like you birth a baby, but then the baby doesn't really exist. It's
right.
not like a real baby, but there's an energy to it. There's a gravitas to it that is really worth creating. If you have something that wants to be that thing that a book is, there's nothing like books in the human psyche. And, as far as we've come in replacing books with other kinds of media and other kinds of experiences, I think books are going to keep living for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, they're a way of transmitting information at both a condensed bandwidth and like in a kind of like granularity that engages with the imagination and the body and the mind in a way that nothing else does. And yeah, do it.
Do it. That's what I would say to anyone listening. Do it. No one ever really that I've had on my show or that I've coached were upset that they wrote it. They were grateful. They were tired. They wanted to take a long hibernation, but they always said it was worth it, no matter how hard it was. And so few people do it. It's a fraction of 1% that ever will become published authors. So it might feel like in your friend group, there's everyone becoming authors, but even with that, it's such a small percentage because it takes so much of your energy and commitment to see it all the way to the end. Thank you so much, Samantha, for being here. True Human, Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World is in bookstores wherever you can buy them. Go to your local bookstore and have them order it. Um, it's the kind of book that you will have to revisit again and again. And I know that has been true for me, just even parts of it that have really opened my mind to something I wasn't even paying attention to. So to me, that's what books do. Thank you again, Samantha, for being here.
You're welcome.